Hello everyone, I'm Santiago and today I'm gonna be testing the Outer Worlds on the GTX 1060. To skip to any of the resolutions tested, check the timestamps down in the description. So on this card, to get 60 frames per second on 1080p, I had to lower visual effects and shadows from ultra to high. Then I kept screen effects to low, I'll explain more about that in a second. And then view distance and textures were on ultra. We have more than enough VRAM to do that. Then at 1440p, when trying to aim to 60 frames, I had to use the lowest settings. The game doesn't hit 60s all the time, but I think it's consistent enough to be a playable experience. As long as it's over 50, I'm not really complaining. And then at 4K, it wasn't possible to get anywhere close 60 frames per second, so I used once again the lowest settings to get over 30 frames. But this was just for the fun of it. I don't expect you to use 4K on this card. I wouldn't do it personally, it's just an experiment, but it's interesting to see that it can run it at over 30 frames per second at the very least. Also, if you want to use ultra settings, you can do that either at 1440p or 1080p. You'll stay over 30 frames per second all the time. So in the options menu, the first thing I recommend is that you lower screen effects to the lowest. This is a combination of things which the game labels as pose effects. This includes blood splatter, lightless, chromatic aberration, and others. At least in my opinion, the game looks better with this on low. I don't like chromatic aberration in games, but that's up to you. You get a small performance uplift, plus you don't get those annoying things on screen. And then to improve performance, I recommend lowering that option called screen effects to the lowest, then shadows, visual effects and view distance together. Lowering those four usually gave me the biggest improvement in performance. Those options individually should also give you a good improvement, but again, for the best difference, lower them together. For the testing, I ran outside one of the first cities. Since there's a lot of vegetation, there's some combat effects when exploding some barrels, and you can see into the distance as well. At least for me, that seems like a good test. If I find a more demanding place, I'll let you know in the description, and if necessary, I'll do another video on it. One other very important thing to mention is that the game can have the CPU maxed out pretty easily, especially if you have only 4 cores. Despite all this, you can get to 60 frames per second with a quad-core CPU. It doesn't seem to be that difficult, but in city areas it can drop below 60 in certain places. Especially the first times you visit a new area, the game will stutter, seems to be loading some assets in the background, and after those things are loaded in for the first time, each time you get back into the game, you shouldn't be seeing those stutters again. At least that was my experience. Then on the system RAM side of things, it can go over 8 GB if you are VRAM limited. So if you have a 4 gig card, I recommend using very high textures. If you have more than 4 gigs, use Ultra, and if you have a 2 gig or 3 gig card, consider using low or medium. In my case, in some of the 4 gig cards, I use Ultra, that's why the RAM usage went over 8 GB super easily, but lowering the textures from Ultra to very high fixed that immediately. So yeah, as long as you have 8 gigs on dual channel, it should be more than enough. But anyway guys, that's about it. I hope you keep enjoying the video, thanks for watching and see you next time.
Here we go! of them. That's the last of them. Here they come. Here goes nothing. I'll fix you right up!